you hear these like sound bites, like that's our closest ally. And then they go, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, let's explain to them what that means. Like, let's explain the importance of that relationship and how it's beneficial to Americans.
It's not.
I'm not privy to all the geopolitical decisions that are going on there. Who knows? Intelligence from...
See, let me be explicitly clear about this, because people like David Sacks, people like Andrew Schulz, they'll sit there and say, oh, you're a wild conspiracy theorist. Let me be crystal clear in the English language and explain this shit to all the idiots. Here he is doing an interview with David Sacks and a couple other hardcore Zionists talking about 9/11. Let's see what he's got to say.
How many Jews are there? There are like more people from Laos than there are Jews, right? Like it's like a very small population. So I think there's like a little bit of a disconnect. And, you know, when you don't know a people, and I think this is probably true, and I could be off, but I think there's like an ambient feeling towards Jews from people who don't know Jews. It's an ambient like.
No. No. It's a dislike for avoiding the truth because it concerns. That's the difference, my friend. We dislike the fact that we can't talk about certain things because Jews are involved. That's the difference.
Light. And the stereotypes are probably not like the best. They're not exactly negative as long as the economy's good, right? They're like, oh, they're successful. They kind of stick together. They own businesses. They whatever. And as long as the economy's good, everybody's cool. And then eggs get expensive and you're behind on your rent and you don't feel hope and and then you start going, why do they got all that? What are they about? Why are they separatists? You know, like I'm here proselytizing. I'm trying to get everybody to go to heaven and they just got their own thing. What? And it's very easy for them to become this like other group. And then you extrapolate that with what's happening like Palestine and Israel. And you get people to start like assessing like the relationship between America and another country. Like you saw America become very uninterested in Ukraine quickly. Like we the second the economy goes down, we start going, well, what do they do for us? Why are we giving them like? And they're starting to ask similar questions about Israel. And
yeah, rightfully so, because we get no fucking strategic benefit from supporting them, Andrew. But you're too much of a retard to know this.
There's a lot of anti-Semites that are jumping on it, and they're muddying the whole thing. They're
of course. Call people that tell the truth anti-Semites, bro. Of course.
Going, this is what they control the government. They do every conspiracy.
Yeah, we told you so.
Time.
You guys saw who that was, right? Yep, David Sacks, huh? And I think this is what's their podcast called, the All In, some shit like that.
And you hear these like sound bites, like that's our closest ally, and then they go, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, let's explain to them what that means. Like, let's explain the importance of that relationship and how it's beneficial to Americans. Because
it's not. That's the problem, Andrew, and you're too much of an idiot to fucking understand that. We get no strategic benefit to our nation from supporting Israel. All we get is foreign wars and animosity in the Middle East. That's all we get from all the support that we give Israel. There's zero strategic benefit to the amount of support that we give to Israel, bro. Zero.
Don't explain it, and you just go, oh, just be quiet, whatever. Then they start to look at these lunatics on Twitter and start to go, wait a minute, is that true?
Yeah, and then they're down the conspiracy hall. And,
I'm not privy to all the geopolitical decisions that are going on there. Who knows? Intelligence from...
See, let me be explicitly clear about this. Because people like David Sacks, people like Andrew Schulz, they'll sit there and say, oh, you're a wild conspiracy theorist. Let me be crystal fucking clear in the English language and explain this shit to all the idiots, okay? No one is saying the Jews killed JFK solely. No one is saying the Jews did 9/11 solely. No one is saying that Epstein was a Jewish spy that benefited Israel only. What we are saying is that there are fingerprints from the government of Israel in many historical events that have changed the course of American history. Okay? Now, I find it interesting that on November 22nd, 1963, a guy named Abraham Zapruder was at the perfect place, at the perfect time, in the 60s when video cameras were a fairly rare thing to have, was there to record the assassination of a sitting U.S. president. And then released that video 10 plus years later, roughly 10 years later, to the tune of $1 to $2 million in today's dollars. I also find it interesting that Abraham Zapruder, the guy who captured the historic film, was one of them boys. And he was a member of B'nai B'rith, a one of them boys organization. Then you find out that the book depository was owned by one of them boys as well. Then you find out the person that told the Dallas Police Department to walk Oswald outside and perp walk him was a guy named Sam Bloom. Then you find out that the person that came and shot and killed Oswald, preventing his ability to speak, was a guy named Jack Ruby, real name Jacob Rubenstein. Then he tells his rabbi and his lawyer in confidence, I did it for the Jewish people. I think anyone with any type of critical thinking skills will understand, that's a little strange. Then you find out that the people that brought JFK down there on November 22nd, 1963, was the Texas Citizens Council, run by members of B'nai B'rith. A what organization? Interesting. So I'm not saying that Israel was the sole participant in the murder of John F. Kennedy. But what I am saying is there's definitely fingerprints there. It's not a conspiracy. It was multiple factions that had a shared interest of getting rid of a president that, quite frankly, was pesky to their agenda. And the problem is asking questions and connecting these dots is what gets you in trouble. They want you to think it was just the CIA and the mafia. They don't want you to talk about this angle. Let's keep cooking. The most famous movie that documents the John F. Kennedy assassination was a film by Oliver Stone called JFK, released in 1991. In the film, Jim Garrison, prosecutor out of New Orleans, goes on a relentless hunt to pursue the assassins of JFK. The movie brings up the CIA, and the movie also brings up the mafia. Mentions these two links. It goes after the single bullet theory, or the magic bullet theory, and basically shows that there was a conspiracy. Something that's very interesting in the film, though, is that the Israeli connection was never mentioned in the movie. At first, I thought maybe this is just a mishap. Maybe they didn't think it was interesting enough. But as I grew older and I realized that, certain things in history are censored if a certain nation's involved, I did a little bit of digging. And I found out that Oliver Stone's real last name is Silverstein. His father changed it to avoid persecution or being labeled as one of them boys. Fair. A lot of people do that. Benjamin Netanyahu's last name isn't Netanyahu. Fair enough. Then I find out who funded the movie. A guy named Arnon Milchan. Who's Arnon Milchan? Well, Arnon Milchan, guys, is a Zionist billionaire that was running around all over Hollywood and was behind many famous movies. But he funded the JFK movie. Now, you would think maybe they didn't want to put the Zionist angle because it wasn't interesting. Who cares about nuclear weapons? Who cares about Farah? Boring, mundane stuff. Not as cool as the CIA and the mafia. Fair. But things get really interesting. You find out that Arnon Milchan was a spy for Israel. Yes, he was. He admitted it on a TV show, which I'll show you here in a second. Right? And not only was he a spy for Israel, he was a spy in a very certain program. He was a spy concerning Israel's unacknowledged nuclear program. Whoa, hold on. So let me get this straight. The most popular movie that documents the assassination of a former sitting U.S. president was funded by an Israeli spy that was a part of their unacknowledged nuclear program and had an incentive to ensure that no one knows that Israel has a nuclear program. Interesting. Then you find out that JFK knew about their nuclear program, pressured Ben-Gurion, the former prime minister of Israel, to have nuclear inspections in Dimona. Oh. Now the bells are ringing. The JFK movie was funded by an Israeli spy to prevent the American public from understanding the Zionist connections and what Kennedy was trying to do behind the scenes, which was de-arm our greatest ally after they stole uranium from us to do their nuclear program. So in other words, the most famous movie that documents the killing of John F. Kennedy was funded by an Israeli spy from their nuclear program that had an incentive to keep you guys in the fucking dark about the Zionist angle that wanted Kennedy gone for knowing about their nuclear program and demanded fucking inspections. This is what they don't want you to know. This is why Andrew Schulz is a retard and doesn't know. This is what's censored. This is what gets you banned. When you connect the dots like this, it's one thing to sit there and be a retard and say, the dev did it! The dev did it! No. It was a concerted effort by multiple entities that needed JFK gone. It just so happens that they conveniently leave out the Israeli angle. And when you find out who funded the movie that left out the Israeli angle, it all makes sense. Arnon Milchan had an incentive to make sure no one from the American public would understand or know that John F. Kennedy was aggressively fighting with the Israeli government to disarm them and take their nuclear weapons away. And Israel couldn't let that happen because they got embarrassed with the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, and they knew that if they didn't have the nuclear weapon, the Arab world would destroy them. That's the fucking truth. That's the truth bomb that no one wants to say. That's why people are scared to bring me on their show. That is why everyone does everything in their power to obfuscate from the fucking truth. And it gets better. We're not done cooking, chat. Let's keep going. So, we went over how Abraham Zapruder, a member of B'nai B'rith and a hardcore Zionist, was at the perfect place at the perfect time to document a historic moment in American history. And he ended up getting that film and selling it for $1 million+. Let's fast forward to 2001, New Jersey, roughly 8 o'clock in the morning. A van drives up to an apartment complex, goes to the top floor, has a perfect vantage point of Manhattan. Several Israeli nationals go out the van and start setting up a camera. The fucking first plane hits. They're celebrating. They're cheering. They're going crazy. Flicking lighters. Moonwalking and shit. Got some good dance moves. In case you guys didn't know, Israelis are really good dancers. A woman, a concerned citizen, sees them doing this shit. What the fuck? Calls the fucking cops. Cops calls the FBI. They apprehend these individuals. They bring them in for questioning. They find out 2 of these individuals had links to Israeli intelligence from FBI databases. They give them polygraph tests. They fail when asked if they were Israeli intelligence. They find out that they work for a moving company. Urban Moving System, something like that, I think. They get a search warrant. They raid the facility. They find an enormous amount of information and terabytes of data. Kind of weird for a fucking moving company, huh? They find that the owner, guy named Dominic Suter, is the owner of the company. They do a little bit more digging. They find out that Israeli intelligence paid for this fucking moving company. They tell Dominic Suter, hey, we need you to come in for some questioning. Guess what happens? He fucking flees the country. Fucking gone. Goku. Where'd he go? Israel. These Israelis are put in jail for roughly 70 days. Okay? They're held in immigration custody. When asked if they had foreknowledge about the towers being hit by planes, they denied it, but they failed the polygraph test. They spent about 70 days in immigration custody. INS back then. This is prior to the Homeland Security Act. And they're deported back to Israel. Well, you're asking yourself, wait, this doesn't make sense. Why aren't they at Guantanamo Bay being waterboarded next to all the other Arabs that have, conducted terrorist attacks or have loose links to the events that transpired on 9/11? Well, you do a little bit of digging. And as always, you figure out what happened. The guy that was over the criminal division of the Department of Justice was a guy named Chertoff. Chertoff is dual citizen, Israeli. And he was also the co-author of the Patriot Act. I know, it gets crazier every time. So Chertoff oversaw these guys getting deported back to Israel. Back in 2001, the Immigration Naturalization Service, INS, was under the Department of Justice, the DOJ. This was before the creation of the Homeland Security Act. Very important for you guys to understand. So immigration fell under the Department of Justice. Chertoff was the head of the criminal division of the DOJ in the Bush administration. Then it gets better. You find out his mom was a significant contributor to Mossad operations in its early fucking inception. These Israelis that documented the entire event and were dancing and celebrating on the worst day in American history are allowed to go back to Israel. They didn't get sent to Guantanamo Bay. They didn't get tortured, none of that stuff, like anyone else that was linked to 9/11 would. And they admit on an Israeli talk show that they had foreknowledge. As a matter of fact, to add insult to injury, one of them later got married on 9/11/2003 to fucking rub salt in the fucking wounds. They thought it was funny. They thought it was funny. Oh, chat, you want me to keep going? Guys, you want me to keep going, or you guys want to hear what Andrew Schulz and David Sachs are going to say about it's all a conspiracy theory? You tell me what you guys want. We got to keep cooking, chat? Yeah, I already see guys in the YouTube chat saying, chill, Myron, this is too much. It's all factual. You could go ahead and look at the declassified FBI records. Everything I'm telling you guys is the truth. So it gets better. Here's a story that not many people know. Tennessee. A gang of Israelis is arrested by the FBI for having a bunch of fake documents, driver's licenses, etc. They had conspired with this woman, a black woman, to procure a bunch of DMV identification. Well, you're probably asking, Myron, why are you talking to me about a document benefit fraud case out of fucking Tennessee? Who cares? They're Israelis, who cares? You're right. Under normal pretenses, this would not matter. But it gets interesting because a couple of these Israelis that were caught in this ring were at the World Trade Center months before the attack. The woman that gave these guys these fake documents under fake aliases and fake names had been paid by these individuals to get the documents. She mysteriously ended up dead in a car crash and fiery end. These Israelis that were at the World Trade Center, they didn't have a permit to be there. The Port Authority ran the World Trade Center. These guys had entry into the World Trade Center, but didn't have permits to work on it. So let me get this straight. We have Israelis taking pictures and dancing when the towers are hit. Then we have another group of Israelis that have fake documents that entered the World Trade Center months before the planes hit and the towers came down in what looks like a controlled demolition, according to many different architects and physicists. It's irrefutable. Everyone considers it a controlled demolition. Interesting. Oh, but it gets better, chat. The buildings were purchased by a guy named Larry Silverstein. He purchased them roughly 1 to 2 months prior to the towers being hit. Not only did he purchase them, which didn't make sense because the buildings had a huge asbestos problem and they were not making money, which in commercial real estate, by the way, just so you guys know, the building being profitable dictates if you do the deal or not. The buildings were not profitable. There was no way that he could have gotten a loan to buy those fucking buildings in a commercial deal because they weren't generating enough rent due to the asbestos problem. But it doesn't matter. He purchased the buildings anyway. And he got an interesting terrorism insurance policy. Unorthodox, never seen before. He would go to the towers every single morning to have breakfast at around 8 a.m. On September 11th, for some odd reason, he had a dermatology appointment. His wife told him, hey, bro, your skin sucks. You're getting old. You got to go to the dermatologist. Force him to go. Convenient timing. That's the day that the towers were hit. So let me get this straight. 1963. A guy named Abraham Zapruder is there at the perfect place at the perfect time to document the assassination of a U.S. president. And he's a member of B'nai B'rith. And he's one of them. Then, 2001, Israeli intelligence assets are once again at the perfect place at the perfect time to document a historic event and celebrating it. They're not prosecuted. They're not charged. They're released by a dual citizen, Israeli, an American citizen, the head of the Justice Department, Chertoff. Then they go back to Israel and admit that they had foreknowledge. Then you got another group of Israelis that were in the towers months before the 9/11 attacks without a permit from the Port Authority. Then on top of that, the person that purchased the buildings was a hardcore Zionist named Larry Silversetin that is friends with Netanyahu. And took out a strange, unorthodox terrorist policy right before the towers were hit. And he walked away with one of the biggest fucking insurance payouts in American history. Do you guys still think I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist? Or did we just string together a bunch of different pertinent facts that show that there are absolutely Israeli fingerprints all over the assassination of a former president and one of the worst terrorist attacks in American history? I'll let you guys decide.